People think the night shift is quiet, peaceful. No supervisors, no customers, no noise. But what they don't tell you is that silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It just means no one is there to see it with you. These are true night shift horror stories, and every single one of them was experienced by someone who thought they were alone. I worked the night shift at a gas station just off the highway, the kind of place people only stop at when they're too tired to keep driving. My shift started at midnight and went until 6 in the morning, and most nights felt exactly the same. The lights inside were always a little too bright, the coffee always tasted burned, and the sound of trucks passing by on the road outside became background noise after a while. Between 1 and 4 in the morning, there were long stretches where no one came in at all. It was just me, the hum of the refrigerators, and the quiet ticking of the clock above the counter, slowly counting down the hours. Around my second week working there, I started noticing something strange about the automatic door. At exactly 2:17 in the morning, it would open by itself. The bell above it would ring, loud and clear, the same way it did when a customer walked in. Every time it happened, I would look up from the register, expecting to see someone standing there, maybe a truck driver or someone half asleep looking for coffee. But the entrance was always empty. No footsteps, no shadows, no car pulling up outside. I told myself it had to be a sensor glitch, something faulty in the door, and I tried not to think about it too much. The problem was that it didn't stop. The next night, the door opened again at 2:17, and the night after that, same time, same sound, same empty doorway. I started paying closer attention, watching the clock as it got closer to that moment, trying to catch the door in the act of malfunctioning. One night, instead of looking at the entrance, I watched the security monitor behind the counter. When the clock hit 2:17, the door opened, and on the camera feed, I saw someone step inside. The figure was tall and thin, standing just far enough to the side that the camera couldn't fully capture their face. I could see their shadow stretching across the floor, long and distorted under the fluorescent lights. My heart started pounding as I slowly looked up from the monitor to the actual entrance. There was no one there. The store was completely empty. When I looked back at the screen, the figure had moved closer to the counter. I still couldn't see its face, but I could tell it was facing directly toward the counter, toward where I was standing. I froze, not knowing whether to turn around or keep staring at the screen. The longer I looked, the more wrong it felt, like the image wasn't supposed to exist at all. After what felt like several minutes, the screen flickered and the hallway was empty again. After that night, I started leaving the counter a few minutes before 2:17 and locking myself in the small office in the back until the time passed. Even then, I could hear the bell ring through the thin walls, clear as day, every single night. I never checked the cameras again during that hour. 2 weeks later, I quit without giving notice. The manager laughed when I told him why, saying the door had always done that and no one else had complained. But I know what I saw on that monitor, and sometimes when I drive past that gas station late at night, I swear I can still see the door opening, right on time, waiting for someone to walk in. I worked as a night security guard at a distribution warehouse on the outskirts of town, a massive concrete building that never fully shut down. During the day, it was loud and crowded, but at night it felt abandoned, like everyone had left in a hurry and forgotten to come back. My shift ran from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and most of that time was spent sitting alone in a small security office, watching camera feeds from 6 different floors. The job was boring enough that I often struggled to stay awake, especially after midnight when nothing ever seemed to happen. One night, sometime around 1:40 in the morning, I noticed movement on one of the screens showing the 4th floor. It was subtle at first, just a dark shape crossing the hallway at the far end of the camera's view. I rewound the footage and watched it again, expecting to see a forklift or maybe a trick of the lighting. There was nothing there. The hallway was completely empty from start to finish. I told myself my eyes were tired and tried to focus on something else, but 10 minutes later, the movement happened again in the exact same spot. I decided to go check it out in person. I grabbed my flashlight and took the elevator up to the 4th floor, already feeling uneasy as the doors opened to a dark, silent hallway. The motion sensor lights turned on one by one as I walked, revealing rows of closed doors and stacked pallets. There was no one there, no sound of footsteps, no sign that anything had moved recently. I walked the entire floor, checked every corner, and found absolutely nothing out of place before heading back downstairs. When I returned to the security office and sat down, my stomach dropped. On the screen for the 4th floor, I could see someone walking down the hallway. It was me. Same uniform, same flashlight, same slow pace. The camera angle was slightly different, but there was no doubt it was my body, my posture, even the way I leaned slightly to one side when I walked. I looked down at my hands, still resting on the desk, and then back at the screen, watching myself stop in the middle of the hallway. The figure on the screen stood still for several seconds before slowly turning its head toward the camera. Even though the resolution wasn't good enough to show facial details, I knew it was looking directly at me. I shut off the monitor and didn't turn it back on for the rest of the night. I quit the next morning, telling my supervisor I couldn't handle the hours anymore. I never told anyone what I saw, because I still don't know how to explain how I was in 2 places at the same time. These stories don't show up for everyone. If you want to keep receiving them, don't leave yet. The next shift starts the moment you subscribe. I worked overnight as part of the cleaning staff at a small local hospital, a job that paid just enough to cover rent and didn't ask many questions. My shift started at 11 at night and ended at 7 in the morning, and most of my work involved empty hallways, dimmed lights, and the constant smell of disinfectant. Hospitals are strange places at night, quieter than you expect, but never truly silent. There was always the distant sound of machines, the occasional footsteps of a nurse, or the low hum of the ventilation system echoing through the corridors. Every night, without fail, the call button in room 312 would go off at exactly 3:03 a.m. The first time it happened, I assumed there was a patient who needed help, so I alerted the nearest nurse. She checked the records and frowned, telling me that the room was empty and had been for weeks. She reset the system and told me not to worry about it. The next night, it happened again. Same room, same time, same soft beeping sound echoing down the hallway. After a week of this, curiosity got the better of me. When the call button activated again at 3:03, I decided to go inside the room myself. The door was unlocked, and when I stepped in, I immediately noticed that the air felt warmer than the rest of the floor. The lights were off, but the bathroom light was on, casting a faint glow across the empty bed. There was no equipment, no personal belongings, nothing to suggest anyone had been there recently. I walked into the bathroom and stopped in front of the mirror. It was fogged over, as if someone had just taken a hot shower, even though the water was cold when I touched the sink. Written slowly across the condensation were the words, "I'm still waiting." The letters were uneven, like whoever wrote them had taken their time, pressing their finger firmly against the glass. I stood there staring, unable to move, until the fog slowly faded and the words disappeared. The next night, room 312 was locked. There was a notice on the door saying it was closed for maintenance, but no one ever worked on it. The call button never went off again, and no one ever explained what had been happening. I finished my contract a month later and transferred to a different building. To this day, I still wake up some nights at exactly 3:03 with the feeling that someone is waiting for me to come back. I worked the night shift as an attendant at an underground parking garage beneath an office building downtown. The garage had 3 levels and no windows, which meant once you went down there, you lost all sense of time. My job was simple: monitor the entrance, issue tickets, and make rounds every hour to make sure everything was secure. Most nights were slow, especially after midnight, when the city above seemed to shut down and the garage became completely empty. One night, just after 4 in the morning, a car entered the garage without its headlights on. That alone caught my attention, because the entrance was dark and most drivers turn their lights on automatically. The car rolled past the booth slowly and parked on the second level, backing into a space near the far wall. No one got out. I watched it on the security monitor for several minutes, expecting a door to open or the interior light to turn on, but nothing happened. After about 20 minutes, I decided to go check on it. I grabbed my flashlight and walked down the ramp to the second level, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. The car was exactly where I had seen it park. The windows were dark and the doors were locked. When I placed my hand on the hood, I felt heat. The engine was still warm, as if it had just been turned off. I checked around the area, calling out to see if anyone was there, but my voice just bounced back at me. There was no sign of the driver anywhere in the garage. When I went back to the booth and checked the cameras again, the footage showed the car entering, parking, and then simply stopping. There was no recording of anyone getting out. It was as if the driver had vanished between frames. By the time my shift ended, the car was gone. There was no record of it exiting the garage and no ticket left behind. I reported it to my supervisor, who told me the cameras sometimes glitched during the night, but I know what I saw, and I know how warm that engine felt. I quit a few weeks later, unable to shake the feeling that the garage wasn't as empty as it looked. I worked overnight technical support at a call center that handled after-hours issues for various companies. The office was nearly empty at night, with only a handful of people scattered across the floor, each of us wearing headsets and staring at our screens. Most of the calls were routine, and after midnight they slowed to almost nothing. It wasn't unusual to go an hour or more without hearing the phone ring at all. One night, a call came through with no caller ID. That wasn't normal, but it wasn't unheard of either, so I answered it like any other. At first, there was only silence on the other end, followed by the faint sound of breathing. I asked how I could help, and before I finished speaking, I heard my own voice repeat the exact same sentence back to me through the headset. Same tone, same pacing, same words. I froze, waiting to see if it was some kind of prank, but the line stayed open. Every time I started to speak, my voice would come back to me first, predicting exactly what I was about to say. I pulled the headset away from my ear, my heart racing, and the voice continued, calmly talking as if it didn't need me anymore. When I finally hung up, the call immediately rang back. I reported the incident to my supervisor, who checked the system and told me there was no record of any incoming call at that time. According to the logs, my line had never connected to anyone. I finished my shift in silence, afraid to answer the phone again. A week later, I transferred to a different department. I still can't. I worked nights doing maintenance at an old factory that only ran part-time, with half the machines shut down after dark. The building was massive, filled with long rows of equipment and narrow walkways that echoed with every step. At night, most of the lights were turned off, leaving large sections of the factory in shadow. My job was to respond if anything malfunctioned, which usually meant sitting alone for hours waiting for something to break. One machine near the back of the factory kept turning itself on. I would shut it down, lock the panel, and return to my station, only to hear it start up again a few minutes later. This happened several times in one night, and each time I checked, there was no sign of tampering. Eventually, the machine stopped starting up altogether, and I thought the problem had resolved itself. Later that night, the printer attached to the machine began producing sheets of paper on its own. When I picked one up, I saw that it wasn't printing error codes or maintenance logs. It was printing timestamps. Each page had a different date and time, all of them set weeks or months into the future. The machine continued printing until the tray was empty. I reported it the next morning, but when the supervisor checked the logs, there was no record of the machine ever turning on. The printed pages were gone, and the printer was empty. I finished my contract and never went back. Sometimes I still wonder if those timestamps meant anything, or if they were moments that were never supposed to happen.
If you're still listening to this, you've probably already realized that this kind of story doesn't show up in your feed by accident. When this video ends, YouTube will decide if it continues to exist. Staying until the end is already a choice.